Anin. Welcome to the second tutorial in the series on databases and access. Today we are going to create our relationships and then import data into the tables. So let's do this. Let's open up Access. And we'll open up our most recent table, or database, which is the one we just created. You may have to click Enable Content after you close the database. It locks it. Just a little bookkeeping thing. We're also going to look at a number of other different little features of Access databases here today. Why isn't that? Oh my gosh. Something is not working right here. Okay. All right. First thing we want to do is establish our relationships between our tables. Because remember, in our schema, we have links up between the ID number of the artist in the artists table and then the foreign key field in the albums table, and same with the genre. So these links have to be established. Here's how we do this. We go into Database Tools, the Database Tools tab. We click on Relationships, and then that brings this up. You might have a pop-up that occurs. In the newer version, it pops up over here on the right. All we have to do is add each table. You can just double-click them to add them. And then these are them. So you can kind of like, where these are on here is irrelevant. You usually just use it as a visualization tool. And these relationship networks can actually become quite complex when you have much larger tables. So arranging them on here in a way that looks nice is and is readable is pretty important. So here's what we're going to do. We need to wire up artist ID here with artist ID here. And how we usually do this is we drag. This is just a click and drag maneuver. I click on artist ID here and drag it over onto here. This little pop-up will appear. And we're just going to activate all these things. We're going to enforce referential integrity. That means that every entry in the albums table has to have a corresponding entry in the album table has to have a corresponding entry in the artist table. We're also going to have cascade update and cascade delete. So if you delete an artist, it'll also delete their albums. Things like that. Not that you ever would create in this particular situation, but that's something that you'll want to do if you have to delete, a customer, for example. All right, genre ID, we'll drag that over here and wire that one up. Enforce referential integrity, cascade update, cascade delete, create. Now, one thing you will notice is this line here has some symbology on it. There's a 1 here. In fact, you'll look at let's look at this. You'll notice here that it says relationship type 1 to many. What that means is, on a table, you can have a 1-to-1 relationship, you can have a many-to-many relationship, you can have a many-to-1 or a 1-to-many. And a 1-to-many relationship basically says there's a 1 here and this little infinity symbol here. What that means is that each artist can have many albums, but each album can only have one artist. So it's like a 1-to-many. One of them can have many, the other one cannot. And it's because we're using the ID in this table with a foreign key in this table. That's what decides which side is the many and which side is the one. So this field right here will always point to exactly one entry in the artists table. And this field right here will point to exactly one entry in the genres table. These two tables aren't pointing at anything. They're only ever referred to by other tables. So they just kind of sit there, and then when you search on them, it'll search all the other tables based on the relationships and find the things that are related to them. So that's what we've got. We've got our relationships created. Let's add some data. Close this. Save it. On the website, on the tutorial page, on tutorial 2, for under chapter 6 databases, we have 2 files here, and we're going to download them both. I'm going to click on one and download it into my downloads folder. Boom. And I'm going to click on the other one, and I'm also going to download that into my downloads folder. So I have them both on my computer. Inside these files, if I open it up, show in folder, edit with Vim. This is what's inside of it. A bunch of names of music artists, and there are 106 of them represented in this list, and so there are at least this many records in the database. So you'll notice the first row has artist ID and artist name. This is the field name that we already established. It has to match this exactly, otherwise it won't work. Artist name, same thing. Make sure that in your table you spell these exactly the same way. And separated by a comma, this is called a CSV file. You guys have seen these, comma separated values. This is exactly the same as what we would import into Excel. All right, let's close that out. And I've got my two files, and I've got my database. So I'm going to start with the artist table. We're going to click here, external data. We're going to click on new data source. We're going to go from a file, and we're going to get from a text file. We can use an Excel spreadsheet to do this. We're going to use a text file because that's what a CSV is. We're going to browse for the file. It is in our downloads folder, and we want artists.csv. So that shows, you can even see all the text in there, verify that it's what we're looking for. We click open. So then that will appear here. Now what we want to do, we don't want to import the source data into a new table. We want to append it to a table that already exists, specifically the artists table. We click OK, and then it's going to give us this dialog, which says, okay, how is your data organized in there? Well, ours is delimited. That means that we're using, in this case, commas to separate the values in there. So they're delimited by commas. The comma is the delimiter. Next, and then it'll ask you, what is your delimiter? And we say, yes, it is a comma. Other thing that's important to note is that the first row contains field names, artist ID, artist name. That is key. Make sure that you check that, and make sure that in your table you have those spelled exactly the same. We click next. We're going to import to table artist. We're going to click finish, and in theory, everything works. You can save this series of steps. We're not going to. Let's open up the table and see what we've got. Look at that. Everything's in there. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. So our table now is populated with data. None of them, look at this though. If you open up one of these, you can actually see what albums there are for this artist. And at this point in time, there are none because the albums table is empty. But cool, huh? Let's do the same thing. New data source from file, text file, browse. We'll grab that genre.csv, open. Append a copy to a table, the genres table, in fact. Click OK. It is delimited. Next. Comma delimited. First row are field names. Next. Finish. And we're done. Close. Let's verify that it all made it. Open up the genres table. There they are. 29 different genres, and with the correct numbers. At this point, you could go into your table and swap these over to being auto numbers, but we're going to ignore it since we're not going to be adding anything more to those tables anyway. So go back to home, close this. Now let's work on the big table. Excuse me. So we've added artists, we've added genres, and now we're going to add a couple of records by hand. Adding some of the album data. So we're going to go into our albums field, and we're going to go ahead, and you don't have to add an album ID, because remember, this one is still set to auto number. So album name, the first one will be Buddy Holly Greatest Hits. You have to do 1977, one more. So the first artist, which is Buddy Holly, the first genre, which is rock and roll, I think. Stop. West Side Story, 1963, T2. And notice it's automatically generating the album ID. We don't need to do it. Camelot, 1960, T2. All Eyes on Me, 1995. Oops, 1995. Tupac, hip hop. Eagles, their greatest hits. 1976, 4-4. Okay, so we've got our first 4 albums in here. Let's not populate this thing with the hundreds of albums that we're going to. Let's just save it. And now we're going to, whoops. We're going to save this, Control S. So that's how you do it. Now, if I were to go into, say, the artist table, and now expand this, I will find that I actually have a reference to that album. If I go to Tupac and click on that, I'll see All Eyes on Me. If I go to Various, I get 2 Show Tunes albums that are going to show up. So you can actually expand them, so you can kind of like do these little mini queries in the table, which is a pretty nice feature. And it happens very quickly. These are very heavily, very well optimized. No, we don't save that. We do want to save this one. Okay. So let's import the album data. Here we go. We're going to download this CSV file into our downloads folder and bring this back over here. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to external data, new data source, from a file, text file. We want to find that file, albums.csv. Notice it has tons of stuff in it. Append a copy to the albums table, click OK, and it is delimited by commas. Next. And you see everything seems to be in order here. Comma delimited, first row contained field names. This is where it's really important that you have to make sure that all of these are exactly right in the table itself. Click Next, click Finish, and hope there are no errors. Okay, good, no errors. Okay, close. Let's open up the albums table now. Everything made it across. Now notice that in here, all of these things are the artist and the genre. So I have the name of an album, I have the year it was released, and then I just have numbers that represent artist ID and genre ID. That's not ideal, but that is how the tables work, because they don't actually have the name of the artist in the album row. It has a reference to an artist in another table. This is all to prevent things like having multiple entries or multiple albums with different. So like if I have 2 Bob Dylan albums and one of them has the artist Bob Dylan and the other one has Dylan, Bob, the database is going to recognize those as 2 different things. It isn't, you won't be able to search on Bob Dylan and get both of them. You only get the one, because it's always going to search exactly. We don't have any sort of like fancy AI searches or anything like that built into a regular database. Maybe someday in the future, but for now you do need to have this creates one entry in the artists table, and then everybody will refer to that one entry. Okay, so everything's in, the data's compiled, and we have it entered, and we are ready to go. Before you submit this, go down to File. Actually, I'm going to do something cool. This is in my Documents folder. I want to show you something. Pause. I just had to swap something over. Okay, so here's what I wanted to demonstrate. In my folder here, I have the file on my hard drive, and it's 528 kilobytes. This is not very much, but it could get really big if you put a lot of data in a database. 0.5 megabyte isn't much, but they can get a lot bigger. So check this out. Here's one way that you can go through, and because basically what ends up happening when it generates a database is each field will have a minimum field length. And so like if I'm creating a table that has, the name of an artist, and the name of the artist is only like 6 characters long, it's still going to reserve like 30 characters or something for the artist name, which means it's going to take up more space than it needs to. You can actually compact your database to make it take up less space on your hard drive by doing this. File, Info, and then here, Compact and Repair. Remember it was 528 kilobytes? I'm going to hit Compact and Repair. It's going to do that, and now it's 100 kilobytes less. So it took it down by almost, not actually, like 10-15% or something like that. but still significant if it became a very large database. You could be shaving off entire megabytes, or if it's a really huge database, even gigabytes, just by compacting it. So there it is. You have to close it before you can submit it, so go ahead and do that now, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.